This is Zettelcast, brought to you by readers, writers, thinkers, and teachers from LiLLiPub, along with our partners in thought, our Zettelkastens. In this show, we share discoveries that our Zettelkastens have shown us.
There you go.
And compare notes on how we're using this marvelous invention in our creative work. Thank you for joining us.
All right, Book. Let's do it again.
All right.
Episode 40. World Building Meets Resonance.
Welcome to episode 40 of the Zettelcast. I'm Victoria, your host for this week's episode, and we've got almost the whole crew here. I want to start by stating the question I posed to the group. When we had our last Roanoke, or our last Zettelcast episode, I made an observation which at some point over the last month or so, and this happens, I believe, with every work of fiction, at least every writer that I know who has talked about this mentions it at some point. And that is the point at which your story and your characters shift from paper or cardboard cutout, kind of fuzzy, not really within your grasp. And then something happens, either in the drafting process or in the brainstorming process, where suddenly they feel like real people. They become tangible, not just in your mind, but in the way that you talk about them, in the way that you interact with them, in the way that you know things about them. Like, for example, I talk about dialogue. You know, without question, in this situation, this person would say this, they would never say that, and vice versa. So that's what got me thinking about, in my mind, I feel like we have turned that corner over in our Roanoke project. So I wanted to unpack that a little bit, because ultimately that's the goal that we want to reach our readers with. We want people to resonate with characters, and as Kathleen says, to carry them with you and be able to connect with them and really feel them in a meaningful way. So that's what I wanted to unpack on this episode, is just a little bit of that evolution for each of us of how our characters went from cardboard to real and what that feels like. And then maybe a word or two about what we're hoping the reader's experience is. With that, my first question, I labeled it a world building exercise. And I asked, are you and or how are you using your Zettelkasten to build out the Roanoke world? Do you have character cards, scene or setting cards, other pools or collections that you rely on for brainstorming or writing? And then I say show and telling your note cards gets you extra points. So the reason I asked this first is because I want our viewers to start to have an inside understanding of what does that process look like when I start writing a character, when I start building out a world. Do I just drop a bunch of stuff in my box and go back later? What does that process look like for each of us? So who wants to start first with how you world build and what that looks like in your notebox?
I'm willing to start first. I think mine isn't going to be super long, but I'm going to prepare to share exactly that thing, the process. So my world starts out with not a card, but a sheet. And I'm going to share my screen here so that I can show you which one. My process for mapping my character Teresita doesn't begin with a card. It begins with a sheet. And this is the character profile worksheet that was created by Deb Hart. She used my book, Writing with Emotion, and captured all of this amazing information about all of the character traits on one sheet with some note space at the bottom to be able to track why you've assigned these character traits to the character. Then the next step for me in a process, this is where a card is going to come in. And I'm going to pick one of these character traits. Ultimately, I'll do them for all of them, but I'm going to create a story card for each one of the character traits. And the story card is going to begin with, what is it about Teresita? What happened in her life that made her, for example, have perseverance in the pinnacle position? And Teresita doesn't understand her world, so I'm going to be talking about that she's fear-based because she doesn't understand things. So she's carved out a little space where she feels comfortable, and she's frightened to leave that space because she has neuro divergence that makes her have learning challenges, and so she's frightened of new things. And so that will be this what I will put out here in the block of what happened, and this is going to be in the form of a backstory. That will be the first part. And then in my response area, I'll be talking about how does that affect her in her current life, in her world? What are the touch points? Where could progress be made for her? So this will be perspective notes. Then the all-important tagline will summarize this whole card and bring it back to me as to why she's suffering with challenges and perseverance. Then that line becomes a part of her memory prompt card. And the memory prompt card for Teresita is going to have each character trait that I've expanded, the wonderful symbol that Julia Scherer created to show that. In this case, it's the pinnacle position. And then that tagline will be written on this card, which is my memory prompt card for her. And so each of her character traits will have a reminder of what is her backstory that made this happen. Well, that's not the end of it because we have a story going. And so I have to turn the page. And when I turn the page, I have Julianne's wonderful worksheet where she allows for traveling across time. And so I'm going to be making similar story cards for each character trait that makes a movement across the story. And again, the card will have not the backstory, but the active story that made that happen. Response, why did that happen? Why did that take place? It will have a tagline, and it will go on a very similar story arc card that will give the tagline from that card. So collectively, they will document and go into my Zettelkasten everything that's happening to this character. Now, I'm going to also have to map, and we'll have to work with Julianne on the mapping of it because there's going to be a key character, Bala, that Teresita is going to be interacting with strongly. And so I'm going to need to know how she maps Bala. So that's part of the fun of this project is that we're going to be working interactively.
Fantastic.
Fair. A+.
So I could go on and on.
I was hoping you'd say that.
I'm going to share my screen as well because, of course, I have PowerPoint. Let's see how this goes. Yes. So I have a variety of different cards, and this first one, I believe I've even read this tagline out in a previous episode. So the not quite time-honored building tradition leads to discovery. And it's 5.5H. So in my Zettelkasten, 5 is the Roanoke project. 0.5 are story arc cards. And H is the heading for this particular thing. Now, if you read, I'll just read this out. It says a scene depicting expansion of a family compound following procedures of the timeless way of building. Some aspect of the procedures newly understood in the scene. Maybe Jenna's fiance is the new homeowner and he discovers something of his ancestry. I didn't know anything about when. I was thinking this might happen later in the story, and and then as we have seen, I've bumped it all the way up to the beginning. Now, doesn't matter. I was thinking this. It was good enough. Now, the title of this slide is it's a story written from cards. It's an opening chapter now with multiple threads. And I think I've also talked about kind of an inspiration from the movie The Godfather, where they have a wedding and you meet a whole lot of people and you see a whole lot about how the family works with each other, the family business. And so I'm adapting that as something to do this. And so we're meeting a lot of people and I'm dropping a lot of hints along the way. So there are many spoilers in 5.5H land. But one that I've already shared, and actually this entire thing for the Roanoke subscribers or people who are part of LiLLiPub and in that circle for Roanoke, this entire story is chapter 1. It's chapter 1 as far as I'm seeing. So the written story is not going to have spoilers, but there are going to be some cards that are spoilers because I'm dropping hints that will pay off later. So Birdie's a blind samurai with a flute is 5.5 H8.
Wait, a blind samurai with a flute walks into a bar.
Yeah. And so we've already, I forget where I know I've shared it in the Fusion Writing. I may have shared it here. It's available for the subscribers. And you'll see how I should and will start doing what Kathleen does when it is dating the bottom of the card to indicate when it happened. This was January, probably, that I made this card. Dylan and his girlfriend, _ didn't have it yet, and now I have filled it in, Birdie. Arrive late to the buildup. They both say, we got lost, wink. Somebody says, it's a beautiful day for it. She is blind. To help her get down to the valley, Chris thinks of taking them down on a 3-wheeler. The path down starts making itself more permanent. And then I have over on the side, thinking about this, the card kind of matures before you start writing the story. He and Jenna reach a better idea. And I put Bézier bag. Well, now, having thought about the mechanics of this thing, it's a Bézier belt. And we heard about the Bézier belt last week. So I also have spoilery cards about the Bézier belt, which I'll not be sharing. But this is, for me, I think of myself as very structured, but look at I'm such a discovery writer. Who knows? I've got little signposts, and I find what makes sense along the way. And this, for me, is how what Victoria described is happening. And it's especially happening when I challenge myself to say, have 2 human beings have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's mine. I've got a bunch of other things that I'll be sharing later, but I think that answers the original question.
Yes, that's perfect. That's absolutely illustrates where the question came from, which is how do you start, and then how do you get yourself from one point to another? I mean, that's literally all it is. I don't have to write a whole book. I just have to write from this point to this point. Now, how am I going to get there? And you just keep doing that over and over and over, and pretty soon you're there. It's done.
Yeah.
Well, I feel very much like the rookie who's sort of tagging along after the rest of you, but I have a few things in my Zettelkasten for this. Mostly I have 2 sections, but one of them has nothing yet. So really only one section, which is called Zero Draft Noodling. And
Nice.
that is where I put all of the random ideas that I have captured. They're not all the random ideas that have happened, but the ones that I've captured um, over the course of our discussions and writing the drafts of various things. And so they have, like when we started and we wrote about, what did we want readers to get from the project? Okay, I put that in there. And what do I want to get from it? And does the colony exist to evolve a pattern language? Is the game an alchemical process? The link as a coming of age. Those are some of the things that I wrote about on there. And I do have cards for the 2 characters that I've been working with. I just haven't put anything on them. I need to go back to the fundamentals, like Kathleen was showing us, and pull out that character sheet and actually put that together. That will help.
Nice.
And by the way, it's not the right timing for a plug, but since we're talking about the character sheets, Deb Hart's character sheet is available in the store on LiLLiPub, and Julianne's is available to members as a free post as a PDF file. So you have to join LiLLiPub.org to get Julianne's. You can purchase Deb's on the LiLLiPub store.
Awesome.
A definitely worthwhile purchase for her because those colors, they use up your ink.
Yeah.
And they're very helpful. It's just it's very nice kind of navigational aid around all of the character traits.
Totally. I just love it, having it at hand at a glance. It's just a nice way to kind of make connections for yourself. And it's important to mention all proceeds go directly to the author, which is kind of innovative.
Yeah, that's the LiLLiPub philosophy. All profits go to the author.
Amen.
Dues cover the overhead. So that's why we charge you guys dues.
That's right. So for my piece, I knew early on that I wanted the primary scene, or the primary setting that I was writing in, I knew I wanted it to be a garden. So early on, I drafted, I don't know, I probably got 6 or 7 cards complete with post-it notes and scribbles and drawings and whatnot of what that might look like. Because the first scene that I wrote is someone goes out into the garden and is like, hey, there's more stuff out here. And that's where she finds the Zettelkasten box. So I knew that would be a piece. So that was important. And that quite literally came out of our conversations when Mel was talking about how he Zettelkasted his garden. I was like, ooh, that's good. So totally stole it. So there's that piece. So I knew it would be a garden. Not too long after that, another scene that I wrote is, I really started to build out Alex as a character and think about what she was like. And like I said, I use the character profile sheet. Mine is laminated and I use it at a glance. So like I'll work on a character and I have, where's my dry erase pens? Or sometimes these little crayon markers work great because they're super waxy. And I can just circle and star and kind of draw it out on my sheet. Then I transfer it to a card and I wipe my sheet clean. So I don't have them saved in that way. I just use one over and over. So I did that, and I started trying to think about where did she come from and where is she headed? And so the next scene that I wrote is her lying on her back looking at this satellite network that broadcasts across the sky as, you know, basically points of light. We've all seen that. And that made me think back, again, stealing from Mel. I'm all in Mel's dish with this story. Spoiler, there it is. Because I thought about his alchemical processes. And so one of the first cards that I wrote to capture that is about Alex and Javi. And I didn't know how they were connected, and I don't necessarily yet, but they are. And because she's interested in what's happening in the sky, she has an intuition about that. And I've got notes on astronomy, astrology, and the alchemical process. And so I feel like she's puzzling something out in kind of an old school, like what we would consider an offline way in this world. And I found that really fascinating. So as I started to think about how to build those pieces together, again, you start with the thing and you write to the other thing. In our last writing challenge, it was to have a dialogue between two people. And so the piece that I wrote is kind of the prequel to when that dialogue happens, because the piece that I wrote is her sort of puzzling something out, and then the answer that floats up to her is go see Javi. So that's what gets her into the henge to meet with him. Still don't know what happens, no idea. So that's kind of how I got her first into a garden, okay, and then how I got her over, to the henge to talk to somebody. And somehow it's all connected with astronomy, astrology, satellite networks, and alchemy, because what else are you gonna do? Makes perfect sense. So yeah, then I do have some backstory cards, but it's funny. Another reason I wanted to ask about world building is something that I got stuck in the last challenge when I wrote the dialogue piece where she has to go meet the other character. I have her pick up her note card, and I got stuck because I didn't know where to have her put it. I'm like, do they wear pants? Do they have pockets? Would she have pockets on a shirt? Is she wearing a hoodie? I had this whole conversation with myself about what are they wearing? Because I had no idea. We'd never talked about that. So I found that really kind of funny and interesting that when you're writing this story as an individual author, you're using your Zettelkasten to build out some of those details. One of the first things I do is character development cards. And that tells me, often I pull pages out of magazines to decide what do they look like? What do they wear? What's their bedroom look like? All those visual things that help make a world real. And then as I was writing, I thought, oh crap, I don't even know if they wear clothes. I'm like, we got to talk about this. Something's horribly wrong. So yeah, that was the other part of what drove the question is when you're writing in a collective, you got to kind of unpack those basic character development cards to understand. Julianne wrote a hilarious, beautiful passage about, who wrote the one about the dress with the legs?
Oh,
That was
yeah,
Kathleen. Yeah, asking, what is that? What is she wearing? And why can I see her legs? Like a dress, a gown, a skirt, Again, you grapple with these things because when you're writing with other people, you don't know. So I just gave myself permission to only write for my character without necessarily influencing what other people would do. So I kind of, in my mind, came up with a uniform for her. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to sit and think, crap, I can't just make this up. I got to find out what everybody else is wearing before I can dress my character. Do they wear spacesuits? I know.
yeah.
But the lesson is, those are the things that sooner or later you will hit a wall, and ideally that's when you can go to your Zettelkasten in that character development section or the world building section or whatever, and just kind of sniff around for clues to how to write your way forward through whatever sticks you up. Just like Julianne said, you kind of unpack the pieces and make the notes and add things, and I need to add this spice and a little bit of that vegetable, and pretty soon you're stirring the stew and it kind of smells right but not quite, and it just comes together. So cool.
I want to, before we move on to the second question, there are a few other cards that I wanted to show.
Yeah.
And, or at least there's one card that I want to show. And that is, and there are more to come later, I think, but one card I want to show, which is the opposite. a card written from a story.
Oh,
Nice.
Because I didn't have any cards at all for the scene that I read last week.
ah,
I just knew two people need to have a conversation in the henge. And then I figured out, oh, I'm going to get Bala into this world somehow. And I'm also going to be establishing Sonny and Chris have a different kind of relationship. It's, a male bonding thing. And so I wrote the entire story in a white heat. And then I made the card later because there's going to be stuff that will refer back to this and the fact that I didn't know it ahead of time. So who cares? Every one of these little things is probably going to have, well, it's certainly going to have the potential to be a seed that I planted. So I just wanted to show that either way feels like how this needs to work.
Yes.
And I'll actually show one more slide here, and that's riffing off of a little bit with the zero draft idea.
Oh yeah.
And that is cards that don't exist yet.
oh,
So I've got I mentioned last week when in our authors discussion that remembering how Marie Kondo with the what is it, the
minerals.
the transformative art of tidying up or something like that, right? And one of her things is that don't focus on making things easy to get, make them easy to put away.
Yes.
And this is a challenge that I've got with my cards because I have all of these cards that have just like erupted from me and they're not all ready yet. I don't know where they go yet. So one thing as I was starting to file away was that I learned, well, how am I going to solve that problem? And cards that don't exist yet. It's just, I just wrote myself, don't distract yourself making cards for ideas that emerge from writing while doing other work that requires focus. Log it here, come back later. And so this is now, I created a new section, 5.0. It's the MIA section. And the back of the card right now is like, I don't know anything about Marjorie, who is Jenna's mom. Don't know enough about Sonny, now that I'm finding him to be pivotal. And I have mentioned thou and ye, and I don't have anything about how does that work? And it's also becoming a pivotal part of the world and the way the Lings of Lydia are navigating being linked, the intimacy there, and being out in the open and the intimacy or lack thereof there. So I now know where to put these things. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to show a couple more slides because
I love it. I love it. Wait, while you're pulling up the next one,
yeah,
I want to comment to that because I'm so glad that you brought that up. That I devoted a section of my book, which will be out in the fall, Zettelkastens for fiction writers. I dedicated a section to that question because I got it multiple times across different workshops. And it was always, okay, I was writing in a white heat and now I have all this stuff that doesn't go anywhere because I just wrote it. How does that work? Because, we're talking about you make your cards and you write from your cards. So yeah, if it goes the other direction, you're exactly correct. You pick a placeholder spot, maybe in the world, this is for setting, this is for mood, this is for theme, whatever. You just make a placeholder and you go with it. And the question that came up most often was, do I need those details? Well, yeah, because eventually it's going to be way easier to go back to that section, thumb through those cards and find the details that you're looking for than it is to go reread your book. That's madness. So yeah, you're exactly right. Pick those things out. And, I literally show how to go through a piece of text and highlight, okay, this word, this word, this word. I need those, and then throw them on cards. You're absolutely correct. It becomes invaluable as the project gets, like I like to say, too big to hold it all in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm
So-
going to riff on that if I may, because the .0 area that you declare is something that Victoria refers to as a pool. I usually think of as a dump box, and it's a place where you can drop cards close to where you're going to need them without all of the burden of having to assign them numbers and do the full indexing. You're not going to lose the cards. They're not going to get cluttered on your desk, and they're there where you need them. And as Victoria talked about, maybe breaking it up into dialogue, landscape, whatever, don't worry about that right away. When the deck gets too full and it becomes cumbersome, that's when you make 0.01 landscape, 0.02 dialogue, whatever you need to put them back into reasonable forms. Because the beautiful thing about creativity is its power. The scary thing about creativity is its fragility. So you gotta take it when you got it, and then you gotta capture it and not lose it.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just I'll on that because I'm taking it a little bit different. So I've got the 5.0, which is the cards that obviously need to exist. So I'll go shopping for those. The cards that exist already but don't exactly know where they belong, it depends on the kind of card. So I've got a lot of little story ideas, and I have created in my 5.5 section, which is the story arc. There's 5.5 A, B, C, where all sorts of different things, and H is the whole the build up of the house. But 5.50, because I thought of this Saturday. So it got
Nice.
field stones. Now this is Gerald Weinberg's fieldstone method of writing, which is very similar in nature to the Zettelkasten. And he just talked, so the metaphor of the fieldstones, and that's Gerald, metaphor of the fieldstones is that there is no prescribed pattern for making a wall. What you do is you find a bunch of rocks and then you find which ones go together. And the rocks could, you encounter them all over the place. And so he's got a whole method he is now deceased. God bless him. But he was an incredibly prolific writer, and that the fieldstone method is a real good adjunct to the Zettelkasten, I think. So my story arc fieldstones go in 5.50. It's like I don't know where it happens. I don't know what it's going to be. And right now, probably all the ideas that I have there are potential spoilers. So I'm not going to share one of those. But now here's something that's a little closer, and that is a fragment that knows what neighborhood it is going to be in, but doesn't know exactly its sequence. And so this is 5.5H underscore. And I'm going to index it. I can see that I haven't indexed it yet because it doesn't have any underlines anywhere. But what this is just my notes about a particular procedure that Chris is going to be showing about how to deal with lumber in the building process, and how people react to it, because he's going to be teaching a lot of townies how to do stuff.
Nice.
And he's also, and it's like somebody was reacting, that was easy. And him thinking, I wanted to be showing Jenna this. Right? So if I encounter in my index something with an underscore, well, that tells me it doesn't know its real address yet, but I can still kind of find it in the neighborhood.
Nice.
So it's
Very
feeling like, well, this all felt like Nadia and me coming up with how to have the filing of cards into Nadia be less of a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, and it shows you how you can personalize the method to to make it as general as you want with just a dump pool, or make it as specific as you want with just the final numbering, not left unknown. That's thank you. That's particularly wonderful.
That's good. I love putting it in its neighborhood. That's a great way to think about it. Because I do. I think of my Zettelkasten as a like a small city, and then when Kathleen described the numbering process as it's just geography, do you want things close together or far apart? That just fits so nicely. I love the feel stones. I'm gonna have to look up that book. Okay, should we do number 2?
Finally, yeah.
Okay. So, this is the heart of the story, because I noticed as we were discussing it, there are moments that just really resonate and you feel them. And we're starting to feel these characters now, and we're feeling their relationship. So my question is, when we are totally in vibe with our characters and our story, the whole thing has a tangible hold on us. Great stories grab us by the shirt collar and bring us to cackling laughter or a wisp of a tear, even more so as the writer if we are really in the flow. I will be the first to admit I have burst into tears writing my novel more than once. Identify and share one point that you feel is an emotional point of connection within the Roanoke story. Does this, in your mind, connect more to a character arc or story development? Does it somehow inform a story theme in your mind, and how so? And then bonus, are you Zettelcasting these things, or are they just draft ideas or notes as you write along? I can answer first. Mine's easy. I don't have an emotional connection with the character that I'm writing yet. After I wrote last week, when she knew she had to go see Javi, all of a sudden I had like a pow. Like I felt her excitement. I felt her gathering momentum. So that was my first point of connection with her. So I'm having fun now, kind of zero drafting out things that could happen next, because I'm really starting to get a sense of how she feels. I don't yet have her voice, which is interesting. So I will have to do some more of those dialogue drafts to get a real sense of what her voice is. But all I know is she's extremely curious, and she's kind of analog and old school in her thinking. But right now, that's the only connection that I have. But I finally felt her last week when I wrote that piece. So.
I'll share with Teresita, because I have a strong emotional connection with Teresita. And Teresita is going to be called upon to stretch herself, to dare to work at the absolute limits of her capability. And she will have to do that to make a breakthrough that will dramatically expand her capabilities, which is going to, in a sense, scare her even more. But having the experience of daring to work at the limits of what she can do is what I share with her, because I'm feeling challenged in every step of the way in creating LiLLiPub and writing my book, and now in trying to write a new book that I haven't told the world about yet too much. I've hinted at it here and there. Every step of the way, I'm feeling challenged to that level, and it's all scary because she has to face a world that she doesn't understand, and I'm going into areas that I've never experienced. So I'm using her as my kind of like, okay, you go out in front and I'll run after you. She's going to be my role model.
Well, what I can say is, again, one of the reasons that I'm such a believer in the dialogue pulling the character out for me. When I wrote the very first scene where Jenna and Malcolm, her father, are having a spat, I had written the whole scene, and there was just something in brackets that says, they have a fundamental disagreement about the link.
Mm.
What is it? I didn't know until I started writing it. I had written everything else, and then I said, okay, that's the only thing in brackets. Time to put the big girl pants on. And part of a spoiler, being honest and direct in communication is a big theme for me in this book. And the two of them, they're having a spat, but they love each other. They're really different and they love each other. And as soon as I just allowed Malcolm to start stating his case, which began with what he admires about how Jenna is with the link, because she's a genius with it. And he's feeling major paternal disquiet. And as that dialogue just came out of me, there was a real choked up moment for me that this father, he's just a human being like anybody else. He doesn't have all the answers, but he's got fears, and they're real. And he's not hiding them from his daughter. What happens when that happens? So that was it's totally fun writing all of these very intimate moments. And my touchstone for the exact opposite for this is the book Emma. Because everything is so hidden underneath manner. And what if you don't do that? Because this is a place where you don't have to. You'll find other problems. But hiding stuff from each other is less of a thing. That's kind of, and what better problems can we solve when we're not misunderstanding each other all the time?
Nice.
Well, with my characters, I think the emotional tug for me is exploring the ways in which the link can not work for some people, which was sort of, seeing, okay, Jenna's got this, she's like born and bred to use the link. What are some cases where it doesn't work that well? And that's actually where both of them came from, both of the characters. Javi, of course, comes from a settlement, a town that all of the people have less of a trust in the link, and it's not as big of a deal. They try to keep a distance from it. And then in addition to that, he's got his own neurological issues where being attached to the link is like really overwhelming to him. So he doesn't actually like it that much. He uses it when he has to, but he prefers to not. And then the other direction I went with the character whose only name we've gotten so far is Sysclean, who, whenever she goes into the link, she's going in under cover of a utility as a virus because she's paranoid. And I haven't quite figured out why she's paranoid yet, but I think that, her family and they have good reason, or they believe they have good reason to be paranoid. And so I'm looking forward to exploring that. But I always like to find the edge cases. Like if it's going one way, I always am like, well, but what about if it's different? And I have a contrary streak. It's not always a good thing, but sometimes it's fun.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. I mean, it's a great element. I mean, I think that's one of the it's one of the superpowers of writing as a group, because everyone is attracted to something different. Everyone brings something different. You know, I just, it makes it super fun because it's like that zinger of an idea that comes out of nowhere. I mean, it happens to us all the time because we don't know what each other's thinking. So very cool.
Yeah. And Teresita is going to need to know more about Sysclean as well, because so far in their first interaction, Sysclean is totally masquerading as a utility and hasn't revealed anything of her humanity whatsoever. Although she's kind of probably getting pretty nervous since it appears that Teresita is just thrilled to have a friend.
And maybe Sysclean doesn't know whether this Teresita thing is a bot.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Or
It's a cop.
yeah, yeah. Ooh, undercover officer. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. So there's lots to be played there. So. And the whole thing for me writing as a group is I didn't make it the central theme, although it was in my head as a central theme for what I identify, is that feeling of having to work on my tippy toes is what I get working in this group, because I feel so inspired and so stimulated that it's really pulling things out of me that I didn't know I had in me.
All around.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Right.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
that's all I have. Hey, Kathleen, I got a note card.
Yes. LiLLiPub.org. This is where you can find us. This is where you can message us. This is where you can join other Zoom calls. We've got lots of them through the week. We've got Zoom calls on the Zettelkastens. We've got Zoom calls on character traits. We've got Zoom calls on writing and the Roanoke project. We have a whole section on the Roanoke project where you can participate and contribute. So come on over to LiLLiPub.org. You will not be sorry that you did.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next
Bye-bye.
time.
Bye.